Good day, everyone. We are your today's reporter, and I am Sarce Lennon Patriarca, together with Kathrina May Gulmatico, and we are going to report our next lesson, which is functions of art. At the end of this lesson, the students must have number one, differentiated content from subject, number two, classified artworks according to subjects, number three, analyze how artists presented the subjects in relation to the real subject. And number four, characterize sources and kinds of art.
So we have here our subject type. So to start with, let me introduce what is subject is first. So when we say subject in art, it generally refer to the main idea that is represented in the artwork. The subject in art also is the essence of the piece. Subject may be thought of as the what in a piece of art, the topic, focus, or the image. So, to determine subject matter in a particular piece of art, ask yourself what is actually depicted in this artwork? What is the artist trying to express to the world? What is his or her message, and how are they going to convey the message? So, we have here our first type of subject, which is the still life, which is a collection of inanimate object arranged together in a specific way. Typically commonplace objects which are either natural or man-made. Example of natural, we have here our flowers, and man-made, which is the vases. So we have next is landscape. Well, landscape is depiction of natural scenery such as mountains or valleys or trees, especially where the main subject is a wide view with its elements arranged into a coherent composition. So our attached sample here is by Splendus. It's a vintage inspired reminiscence of a fresh countryside afternoon. So next is nature. Nature, a focused view or interpretation of specific natural elements. Well, depiction of nature can also be about intellectual thought and spirituality. And our attached sample here is by Charles Simpson, which is the bird table. Next is the portraiture, which is an image of a particular person or animal or group thereof. So next is abstract. Well, abstract is a non-representational work of art. So our attached sample here is by Lex Art Party. It's called the Careful Iguana. So lastly is the Day of the Dead. It's a Mexican holiday with a vibrant artistic tradition, and our attached sample here is by Jane Emery. So next is representation. Representation is the use of signs that stand in for and take the place of something else. Signs are arranged in order to form semantic construction and express relation. So representation is where people organize the world in reality through the act of naming its elements. So we have here the example of representational art, include Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. Well, it is a visual representation of the idea of happiness suggested by the word Gioconda in Italian. Next, we have the sources of subjects. So we have two main types of sources, which are the primary and the secondary sources. So first, primary sources. Primary sources are materials that provide first-hand accounts of the event, practices, or condition you are researching. So primary sources are usually considered to be items like personal letters, diaries, records of the documents created during the period under study. So documents that were created by witnesses of first recorders of the certain events. Primary sources might also include first-hand accounts that were documented later, such as autobiographies, memoirs, and oral histories. However, the most useful primary sources are usually considered to be those that were created closest to the time period you are researching. So next, secondary sources, where secondary sources are written about events in the past. These are also considered to be anything that refers to primary source such as review of an artwork. They usually interpret those events through the lens of the time period in which they are written. New discoveries are made and attitudes change over the time, causing understanding of past events to change. Facts may remain consistent, but interpretation change, sometimes drastically. Sources that have been published very recently will reflect the current theories and the understanding of the past. If you use secondary source that was published decades ago, it is very important to know that subsequent scholars have written on the topic and what criticism they have made about the earlier work or its approach to the topic. So, but for our purpose in the modern art history course, we will use the broader definition above to classify material as primary. So, where to find primary and secondary sources? So, The Starry Night is an oil on canvas painting by the Dutch post impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, which is exhibited and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, is a primary source since it's the original work of art. When you go to the museum, you are looking at the exact work that he made. Any other version that you have seen in visual culture, such as photographs, is a reproduction. It can be a different size and the color may vary. You might get the general idea of the painting, but it would not be the same experience as seeing the real work. So Vincent van Gogh wrote many letters to his brother Theo, and these letters are also primary sources. But you would have to go to an archive to read the actual letters. At the archive, you would wear special protective gloves so that the oil from your hands would not harm the fragile paper, and the letters would be brought to you in a special containers. You would read them in an archival room where the temperature and humidity were controlled. You might be allowed to photocopy them. In that case, you would have to transcribe the contents by hand. The advantage of having this kind of access to a primary source is that you actually handle the original material. You can see exactly what Van Gogh's handwriting looked like and feel the quality of the paper. You'd be using the original primary source. Some archives are digitalizing their collection and making them freely available on the web. For instance, the Van Gogh Museum has created the website for their Van Gogh letters with original text, translations, and indexes. Luckily, there are other ways to access the primary source information without going to archive. Primary source information can be copied and made available in other publications, letters, diaries, journals, and newspapers. Additionally, these reproductions can be in academic databases as well as educational and commercial websites. One of the easiest ways to access primary source material without going to an article is to use an anthology, which is a collection of writing or articles. Scholars have amassed anthologies of selected primary source material and written additional commentary to help the reader understand the meaning and context of the primary source material. Generally, the anthology will have specific focus like Renaissance writing on art making, 19th century art criticism of a specific individual. Examples for these are books with the published letters of Vincent van Gogh for to his brother, along with information about the artist. A scholar has written the supporting material, and that material is considered a secondary source. It was written later than the primary source. It comments or explains or critiques the primary source. In contrast, secondary source address the primary source but were created later by someone who did not experience it firsthand or participate in the event or condition you are researching. The secondary source generally scholarly books including textbooks, articles, encyclopedias, and anthologies. The Museum of Modern Art's page for Starry Night contains a mixtape of primary source, a reproduction of the painting and quotes of Van Gogh's letters, a secondary source, the Garley Walt gallery wall text except from the more publication.
Content in art. Number 1. Factual meaning. The most rudimentary level of meaning, for it may be extracted from the identifiable or recognizable forms in the artwork and understanding how these elements relate to one another. Example for this is Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, that depicts a dreamy interpretation of the artist's asylum room's sweeping view of Saint Remy de Provence. Number 2. Conventional meaning pertains to the acknowledged interpretation of the artwork using motifs, signs, and symbols and other ciphers as basis of its meaning. These conventions are established through time, strengthened by recurrent use and wide acceptance by its viewers or audience and scholars who study them. Conventional art is an art that is made using standard mediums such as paint and canvas. Number 3. Subjective meaning. When subjectives are consulted, a variety of meanings may arise when a particular work of art is read. Subjectivity is based on personal opinions and feelings rather than on agreed facts. A painting might be beautiful to one person and ugly to another, but the material object remains unchanged. And that's the end of our discussion. Thank you, and please leave a comment as your feedback.